Welcome to the Startup Leaders Show, where we learn lessons from startup founders and executives. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I am really excited to introduce our guest for today, Steve Sponseller. He is the president and patent strategist for Innovation Strategies. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for making time for this.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourself and Innovation Strategies.
Sure. So I've loved technology and kids and electronics and spacecraft and stuff since I was a kid. And I started down an engineering path, so that kind of helped with all my technical background. But then once I started working as an engineer a little bit, especially in computers and electronic systems, kind of realized I wasn't cut out for that. The debugging part wasn't for me. I love the design, the creativity. But I'd always thought about doing law, so that's when I thought, well, I could do law school also and take my engineering background and then an expertise in learning patents to work with tech companies and merge that together. And that's what I did. I created my own company, Innovation Strategies, as a tech startup, not your traditional tech startup, but in 2006. So it's been quite a while, and it's been an interesting experience. But I love what I'm doing today. I get to work with tech companies. I get to work with bright engineers and developers, and I get to see all the things that are coming before the rest of the world because we talked about it beforehand. So that's kind of what I love. I love meeting with the engineers, helping them maybe broaden their ideas, or I come in with a different perspective that they hadn't thought of. But I can still speak their language because I have an engineering degree, but I get to help them and have fun in the process.
That is great. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, what are some of the just high level things that startup founders need to be thinking about in terms of patents?
Well, the first is start early and at least get some basic knowledge. I've met with a lot of CEOs and company leaders of smaller startups, tech startups, and they don't really understand patents, which I can understand. They can be kind of complicated, but many of them haven't even made an effort. They're kind of bury their head in the sand. It's like, I'm going to ignore patents and not worry about it until something happens and they kind of wish they hadn't done that. Like a competitor starts copying some of their things and they can't do anything to stop them. So I just, the most fundamental advice I can give is just kind of understand some of the basics of patents and especially some of the deadlines. There's activities that you do in your business, whether you publish a white paper, you sell a product that contains an invention, those can trigger patent filing deadlines that if you miss those deadlines, you can't recover. And you've essentially just donated that invention to your competitors for free. So just have some basic knowledge. It's not as scary as you might think, but yeah, get some good information about it.
That's great. That's really helpful. Okay, so it sounds like, obviously you've been in business for many, many years now. And so you've kind of built your own startup as well. What have been the greatest factors in your success so far?
Well, I love to learn. That's part of why I like my job. I always get to be learning about new technologies. But that's something, it's not just the technology. I learn different things from my business and different skills. Part of it's learning what I'm good at, what I enjoy, and then the other parts that I'm not, and I should find someone else to help with it. But I've also, especially the last quite a few years, just worked on building good business relationships because it's me. I have a team of people supporting me, but they're contractors. I don't have employees, but I've built a team through kind of mentoring relationships and masterminds to really have it's a sounding board or some other people to talk about ideas and things so that it's not just me out there with my crazy ideas. And I need somebody to rein me in sometimes and say, Steve, you might want to try this instead, or here's another option or something like that. So I found that to be kind of some of the most valuable things that helped my success.
That's great. So how have you actually gone about finding those people? You said something about mastermind groups. Are those groups that you've formed or that you've just participated in?
So far, they've been ones that I've participated in. I've thought about creating some, but just haven't. I make some good connections, whether it's through social media and through clients, and clients either refer me to other people, possibly for patent-related work, but also just, hey, you would hit it off with this guy or this gal. and just kind of building those relationships. And then if I get invited to a mastermind and it works out well, that's good. I mean, I was in a Toastmasters group several years ago and actually met some really interesting people there, some really savvy business people that I stay connected with. So kind of whenever it pops up, when I least expect it, I see a group. And sometimes it's just, I connect with somebody and they're like, hey, my buddy Karen is in this same idea. Why don't the three of us start doing a monthly call or twice a month or something like that? So they just kind of pop up for a while, and then if our business moves to another phase, then sometimes they just dissolve.
Right. That's great. So when you kind of talked about that a lot of startup founders don't start early enough on their patent journey, what are some of the other things that founders maybe do wrong or pitfalls that they fall into as it applies to patent strategy?
Yeah. This is, I guess, an extension of what I mentioned earlier about kind of just a misunderstanding. And it's not just the founders, it can be the team members not understanding what an invention is. I mean, it sounds obvious, but well, you invent something, it's something new. But I worked as an engineer for several years before going to become a patent attorney. And I worked in a small tech startup. And there was this one guy, Don, who worked in the optics lab. We were an optics company. He invented everything. It's like basically you leave Don alone in his lab because he's inventing stuff. The rest of you just build what he tells you to. But as I look back on this, I knew nothing about patents. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and hadn't been told anything about patents. So I just thought that's the way it is. Now I look back and I realize what a mistake that was, because the rest of the team has ideas. They can take Don's ideas and expand them, or maybe even make them more applicable in a commercial product. So it's teaching your team what an invention is and where the threshold is. Inventions don't have to be these revolutionary, brand new things. They're often just incremental changes, but they're really valuable because it provides a competitive edge or a differentiator in your product.
Right. So is there some sort of definition as to what that is that makes it, I guess, different enough from something that's come before it?
It's subjective. The patent, well, and it depends what the patent office says. It depends what the courts say. It basically has to be something that's new, novel, and you have to, kind of like you said, be able to distinguish it from what other people have done. And there's just kind of this magic invisible threshold as far as how much it has to be different. If there was a patent on a hammer that's red, you wouldn't get that. And you make a hammer that's blue, it's like, well, that would be just an obvious change. That's the other word that the patent office uses. Mm-hmm. Is it just an obvious change from what people did before, or is there really kind of some extra invention going on here and something people hadn't considered before?
Got it. So how do you determine if what you are working on has already been done before?
We can do searching. That's usually, if you're going to invest in a patent application, you'll often do some searching through issued patents. There's 11.5 million US patents plus millions more international, and do searching on Google and a lot of the other things for white papers, documents, product brochures, and most of that's keyword searching. Like AI is starting to make that look a little different these days, but to see what's out there and kind of predict what the examiner might say, and we'll do this before we write the application, because if this white paper here is kind of close, so let's write the application to kind of design around that or differentiate it and put that right in the application itself. So that it can help make a stronger patent application. And if you find something that's just dead on what you've done, then don't spend the money on a patent application because you're not going to get it.
Right. So once you actually have a patent, are there things that you need to actively do to protect that patent? Or, once you have it, are you just good to go?
There's several things you still should do. Well, number one, you have to pay the maintenance fees. And in the United States, every 3.5 years, you have to pay a fee to keep the patent alive through its 20-year life. And if you don't do that, it goes abandoned. Keep an eye out for infringers. So if your patent is covering an invention that's giving you an edge in the marketplace, whether it's a product feature or benefit, and if you see other people using it, then you should take action to stop them, because otherwise they potentially are cutting into your customer base. And a lot of startups will come up with an initial invention. That's what they build a company around. But as it grows and as they get more market feedback and more technological breakthroughs, there's usually follow-up inventions. And sometimes those follow-up inventions are just as valuable from a protection perspective as the original invention. So you want to keep an eye out for kind of some of the big improvements that you make and consider patent applications for those as well, and start building a portfolio of patents that protects your technology.
Got it. Do you need to actually proactively talk about your patents? Is that an important thing to do? And I mean, obviously, I think from a marketing perspective, that helps you differentiate your company to a certain extent. So is it, I guess, important that you're communicating about the patents that your company has?
It's not required, but yet it is a public, once the patent issues, it's a public document. So there isn't really any problem with talking about it. You'll see there's certain industry, the pharmaceutical, every time a new patent comes out, they kind of make a big deal out of it and publicize it. But it is, like you said, it's great for marketing and advertising. I saw one of the major car companies the other day said, our new electronic drive system has 62 patents in it, or patented inventions. So sure, it's marketing. It does put other people on notice that you've got a patent out there. It doesn't necessarily, it's not an assertion against them legally, but it just kind of lets the world know, and at least helps you position from a marketing standpoint. It positions you as an industry leader. It's like, look, we're at the forefront here. We're getting patents on our inventions, so you should pay attention to us.
Absolutely. Okay, so kind of hopping back to your business a little bit here, is there anything that if you were to start all over that you would have done differently?
A lot of things. I think I would have gotten, well, two things. One is that I mentioned earlier, getting kind of my team of mentors, or just kind of go-to people to bounce around ideas, to do some brainstorming, and to potentially collaborate with is one of them. But also would have been, I guess, to delegate or outsource some of my activities. Early on, I thought I had to do everything, and there's a lot of those things that aren't my area of expertise. Video editing, bookkeeping and accounting, that's just not me. So I finally got smart enough to find some people to help with that. And I guess what I've been doing even more recently is I'm not looking for somebody that I have to spend a lot of time training them how to do it. So my accountant, I didn't have to explain accounting to him. He's an expert. So they know more about it than I do. I can just hand it to them. I know they're doing a great job. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, the pieces where I either hate doing the activity or I'm just not good at it. Why not find somebody who loves doing that activity and is an expert? They can do their expertise, I'll do mine. And it's refreshing. It frees up so much time and reduces my stress level. So I would have started doing that sooner.
Yeah, not a bad idea. When you're going through the patent process, so a lot of times when we talk to people on this show, we talk about roadblocks that you run into. I'm curious, are there roadblocks that you run into on patents when you're trying to get those patents issued?
Oh yeah, the roadblock's called the examiner. And it is, and part of that, I used to think, well, we write the patent application, we file it, the examiner, they usually reject them. They find a way to reject it initially, and then we kind of negotiate how we're going to define the invention. And I thought, well, it is what it is. But after I had done it for a while and talked to some of my mentors, they're like, no, you build this into the patent application when you write it. So like I mentioned, you can do a search. You know what the examiner is going to be looking at. You can kind of predict what kind of objections they might raise to prevent the patent application from issuing. And we work at, okay, what's our counter argument? How do we overcome that objection? And we get that into the application itself. So then if maybe the examiner doesn't raise it because they'll see that we addressed it, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or if the examiner does raise it, then we can point to our language in the application and say, no, we're different. See, here we explained this on page 5. So it's planning ahead for those. And I mean, you never know exactly what the examiner is going to say, but they can kind of reduce the headaches a little bit if you think ahead and kind of plan for it.
Got it. It sounds like, are the examiners, do they, I guess, tend to err on the side of not issuing the patents? You kind of make it sound that way a little bit.
Yes. The examiners are great. They've all got technical expertise. And the other thing is patent office examiners in the United States work in a very specific technology. I went to school with somebody, and his area of technology when he was an examiner was fly fishing reels. That's all he saw, 40 hours a week. That's what he worked on. So he got to know it really, really well. So part of the problem is, to the examiner, somebody with that level of knowledge, everything seems obvious. It's like, well, yeah, this is obvious, with a few rare exceptions. But we also write the patent applications as a patent drafter. I write them so that the legal definition of the invention is as broad as we can get. So the examiner has to go do a kind of a broad search. And we really expect those initial broad claims to be rejected. So we kind of want to see the examiner's initial position. And then from there, we can narrow the claims down and make them more specific to differentiate from whatever it is the examiner found, other patents or white papers or things like that. So it's partly the way we write them. And yeah, they're going to err on the side of rejecting the claims with valid reasons. But then we can negotiate that to get something allowed.
Got it. So you get a report back from them that kind of line items out the things where they see that there's an issue, that there's something already out there that's patented.
Yes. And they have to be fairly specific. They have to say, okay, in this claim or this portion of your definition of the invention, here's what you said. Here's this other reference or document that we found. It says this. That's either exactly the same or it's very close or just an obvious variation. So then that gives us a chance to either change our language, argue with the examiner, say politely, say, no, it doesn't teach what you say, or that's going in a different direction than what we're doing. And it's a back and forth, either in written, or we can also do video conferences with the examiners and just kind of talk through it. And sometimes they've got a lot of work to do in a fair short amount of time. And they certainly don't know the invention as well as I do and as well as the inventors do. So sometimes we can educate them and maybe clarify what the novelty is and just give them a better understanding of it. That helps sometimes.
Got it. So what about international patents? So say you have your patent in your home country, if that's the US, and then is it important that I go and get patents in other geographies? How important is that?
The best legal answer, it depends. Where you're selling, where you're making. So a U.S. patent, if you get that issued, it will allow you to exclude other people from making the invention in the United States, selling it in the United States, or using it in the United States. So if, for example, if Europe is one of your big markets, and there's potential infringers that would be making it, using it, and selling it there, and maybe they just don't sell in the United States, or they'll avoid that to avoid your patent, then maybe that's a place to look for patents also. So each country, or Europe, is kind of can be an application by itself. But what countries are you doing significant business in? Where are there likely to be infringers or people that you want to license the invention to, things like that? Then it would be worth looking at the additional cost for the international filings.
Got it. Okay, so any, I guess, final thoughts on just patent strategy for founders?
Don't put it off. If you don't understand, contact me. I've got simple documents that explain things, but it's painful for me when I talk with somebody who's come to me and says, okay, we're ready to finally file a patent application. So I ask a few questions, and one of them is always, have you sold this in a product or have you disclosed it? And almost every week, somebody's like, yeah, we did. And sometimes it's 18, 24 months ago that they disclosed it at a conference or they published a white paper that included the invention details. I'm like, okay, you can't protect that invention. That's gone. So act early, even if it's just to get some guidance and say, okay, we're going to be triggering this activity today. That means we have 12 months to file a patent application if we want to. Mm-hmm. At least know what those deadlines are so you can make a business decision and don't have it taken away from you without even knowing that the deadline existed.
Right, right. Okay, so I always like to finish with one last question, which is your prediction about the future. So, if you could make one prediction about the future, what would it be?
Okay. This will sound painfully obvious, but let me explain it just a little bit. Fast changes. Technology, I've been in the tech world since the mid 90s, and it's always moved quickly. But the rate at which some things are transferring, moving today, growing, are just beyond what I've seen before. Space technology is one example. The rate at which the launches are increasing, the number of satellites in orbit, all the missions planned all over our local galaxy. It's exciting. And I guess the biggest thing is that's got so many opportunities, so many different things to do. I mean, AI is going to be opening up all kinds of things, autonomous vehicles. And I guess what's exciting to me and what I would make of this and how I would take advantage of it is take a look at these trends, watch the technologies, even if it's something you think may not be relevant in your industry or your company, it's bleeding over all over the place. So look at what's happening out there and think about how it could apply. If you think AI doesn't apply to you, I would take a second look because it probably will either now or in the near future. So be looking at all those fast changes. Try not to be intimidated, but look at them as opportunities to help your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great prediction. So, if somebody wanted to learn more about innovation strategies, what should they do?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I hang out there a lot, especially if you mentioned that you saw me on Lisa's show. I will definitely connect with you. Or you can visit my website. That's the website for my services and the company together. It's stevesponseller.com. And
Great.
if you
Well,
connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And we would love to have you back again. So hopefully you'll visit us again soon.
I would love that. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.